All right, Wes. Question one is the easy one, but it usually extracts a great story. How did you fall into franchising? Because nobody wants to fall in franchising, then we do, and then we love it. But how did you fall into franchising? What's your franchise story?
Great question. Yeah, I think franchising kind of came to me in this sense. So I was operating United Defense Tactical, which is our reality-based, threat training company, and I had some students that just loved what we were doing, just huge fans, and they approached me, and it turns out that they were, really in leadership positions and founding positions in many different franchise businesses, including UFC, Mayweather Boxing, McGregor Fast, XPT, and a number of other great brands. And they kind of approached me and said, "Man, we love what you're doing. We think this has a huge impact on people in the community. And have you ever thought about maybe franchising this?" And I had thought about it a little bit, maybe doing more corporate stores is kind of what we were looking at the time. And after working with this group and being able to kind of assemble a team, it really made sense for us to work in moving forward with a franchise opportunity with the unit economics that we have on this model. And so that's kind of how I got started into franchising.
All right, so consultancies, they say, go franchise your business. If you think back to that moment, and then what your expectations were when you started thinking about it, and then what the realities were, what were some of the gaps in what you perceived franchising was, what it really is, and what your expectations were, and what the realities are?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that coming into it, I think everybody kind of has just maybe a very general idea of what franchising is, with not a lot of detail and information. And so I think I was kind of in that category. I have run and built, several companies, but had never, tried to franchise any of those opportunities. So I think there's just a lot to build, to do it correctly. Obviously, there's a lot of compliance. And I think the biggest thing and the biggest value of a franchise that a franchisor can bring is the support, and really everything has, all the brain damage has been done, and, everything's kind of been as perfected as it can be. And so I think that was something that really was surprising, how much there was to put together to properly do it. And the group that I was telling you about, it's actually brought on one of these gentlemen as a partner, Mike Milby, who was co-founded Mayweather Boxing and is the head of Fit Lab, and Don Michael. So they're actually part of our team and not consultants. But they,
awesome.
Just to clarify, they initially offered to help us for free just because they believed in the model, and then we kind of built it from there, from them, becoming part of our team.
How many units do you guys have now?
What's that?
How many locations do you have now?
So we have six franchises that have been awarded. So we just started franchising earlier this year. So we have 6 that are officially awarded. We've got a number of candidates, in the pipeline that we're working with right now, that obviously more will come from that. And we're just kind of focused on a few markets, at a time, including, our closer markets here in California, but also Las Vegas, Dallas, Tampa. So there's a few other markets that we're currently working with.
So when you go through the process of franchising, you're operating your first business, and it doesn't seem like you ever had a dream of franchising it. It was more by, persuasion of your customers saying this should be franchised. Did franchising ever cross your mind as you were creating it?
Yeah, maybe not when I first created it. There was a real need that we were filling here, so that was kind of the passion for it, is to build it to fill the need. And we can kind of dive into that a little bit. But the answer your question, sorry, Nick. To answer your question, I'm sorry, I apologize. What was your question? What was the original question?
Were you thinking about franchising it in the middle of getting?
Yeah, maybe kind of once we started, really kind of got the project up and running. The response was overwhelming. From the civilian community, law enforcement. We started getting calls from other markets. We've had customers that maybe were moving, especially during kind of the corona crisis. moving to other states that were hoping that we were going to, bring, locations out, where they were. And so there was, just a lot of internal demand for additional locations. And it just resonated so well with people, this type of training, that it was kind of a no-brainer for us to expand. There was no choice. We had to expand. It was really more of a matter, we were going to do it corporate stores, or we're going to do it through a franchise model.
From creating the business to franchising, how much time went by?
We're in about 4.5 years right now.
And so if you go back to you've opened up the business, I assume bootstrapping, hustling, grit, all of the elements of an entrepreneur had to go into that. How is the progression? How did you go about finding this and creating it and building it?
Yeah, great question. So this is something we're really first to market in what we're doing in this reality-based training. So it was kind of a whole new sector that needed, some development and, testing and exploration to kind of see, how we make the model, as successful as it has become, today. But the kind of the fact of the matter is that the type of self-defense training and firearms training that the people are currently doing is oftentimes not really preparing them for real situation. And let me ask you this, Nick, have you been to a range before? Have you shot a gun at an indoor range?
I've thought about it. I have not.
Okay. So when people, and that's fine. And obviously, everybody has the right to have a gun. Doesn't mean everybody should, right? And obviously it's not necessarily for everyone, but if they do have a gun, they really do have a responsibility to get proper training. So the current training that's really out there for pretty much everybody, whether it's civilian, law enforcement, even most military, it's very static training. And by that, I mean that there's no real reality-based component. You're at a range, there's a piece of paper, there's no threat, there's no fight or flight, there's no communication or de-escalation, there's no ramifications. It's not even, nobody even perceives it as a real threat. And so effectively what you're doing is just marksmanship. You're just learning how to, under no pressure, to put a hole in a piece of paper. So when you take somebody who's had that kind of training, and then which is almost no training, and then put them in a real situation where they've got a threat quickly approaching them, maybe there's multiple threats, there's the legality of, should I draw my gun? Can I draw my gun? How would I articulate I needed to? The bodily harm that can possibly happen, protecting your family, all those factors, people tend to fall down to a very low level of performance. And a lot of times even just completely freeze up. And so that's really the training that's provided. So what we do is a little bit different. And in my background, as a trained, private military contractor and a high level executive protection, specialist and self-defense, expert, the realizing that, reality is not that type of training. It really is very dynamic. You have to be, situationally aware. The last thing we want to do is use a weapon in a situation if we don't have to, but being situationally aware, having good threat recognition skills, being able to control that kind of initial fight or flight, being able to get distance, maybe escape the situation, being able to defend ourselves. And then God forbid, if we actually had to draw a weapon because our life was in immediate and imminent danger, then we have the ability to, perform correctly and to articulate, why we would need to do that. So the training just didn't really exist. It just wasn't out there. So we do a combination of simulator training. So we put our members, our students, in simulators where they're using a laser-based weapon system, and it creates a real scenario where it is a threat. You're dealing with a real threat. You've got to decide if it's a threat. You've got to, decide if you're going to engage that threat. But it's a, somewhat interactive scenario. And in addition to that, we do live fire, we do self-defense. And so really kind of creating a complete, program for somebody's safety and self-defense.
All right. So 2 comments and then my follow-up question. 2 comments is, 1, get what you're saying. Every time I play that video game where the aliens are coming out and you're not supposed to shoot the humans, I always shoot the humans. So I could totally benefit from that. Secondly, our security alarm when we lived in Chicago went off in the middle of the night. Now the wind blew the door open. I didn't know. I grabbed the iron. So that's how I went for defense. And I marched
Yeah.
down those stairs ready to battle with an iron. If I had you, you would have made me feel a lot more confident. But when
So
you're
we can help you. We can help you.
when you're marketing this thing, because I would imagine like to the customer, and we're not even at franchise side yet, but to the customer, I would assume there's one, I want to understand how to use a weapon properly, and I'm going to have a weapon in my home. Therefore, you can help train me. But there's also got to be like fear based, like some moment has happened that is triggering me to make sure that I feel safer in the moment. How do you like you when you open up this business? Like, how are you actually getting customers? Is it from a arms dealer that says you need to go get training as a referral? Is it from community members that are afraid and need support? Like, how did you even get the customer base going?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's surprising that, or it may be surprising to you, but the vast majority of people now want training and firearms. And that really, before COVID, this was an amazing business. And then after COVID, which was obviously a terrible time for everybody, but that need only grew during 2020. Our business grew 76%, kind of in the heat of COVID. So what it did is it brought to everyone's mind that, to some degree, you have to be your own protector. If you go to a gas station, you're pumping gas, and somebody comes up and is trying to rob you, attack you, carjack you, the police are not going to instantly arrive and be able to save you in 10 seconds, right? So we have to take some responsibility to be able to protect ourselves. Crime has been high for a long time, but in the last few years, it has absolutely skyrocketed. I don't think there's anybody on the planet that can't say that at this point. Certainly in the United States, seeing it, in every city and in every even small town. So crime is on the rise, and there's more of a need than ever for people to be able to protect themselves. And I think that people have realized that. So we've never had a problem in finding a customer. It's really just letting them know that we're here and that there is this other type of training and this more reality-based training that can help prepare them to survive, a real life-threatening situation. Because the fact of the matter is, Nick, is you can't do something you haven't been trained to do. Yeah. So you can't have an idea of, oh, I do this or I would do that. You won't, because under pressure, you won't even be able to remember what your plan was. And if you've never actually run that plan, and you really can't do it. And so we see that time and time again. So our goal is it's really everyone's coming to us now. They might be a professional in law enforcement or in the military or in security, but a lot of times we're getting people who've never had a gun, never wanted a gun before, but now they realize, the value of being able to protect themselves, and they've seen the crime on the rise, and maybe something's happened to them, maybe not, but in almost all cases, somebody knows somebody that something has happened to in the last, 4 or 5, years or so. And so it really is a motivator for them to be able to prepare them, defend and be able to prepare for, these types of life-threatening situations. And people want to be able to get their concealed carry. They want to be able to protect themselves. They want to be able to protect their family. They want to be able to protect from a home invasion. And these are things that are happening on a daily basis right now.
This is going to be a potentially dumb statement, and I preface it by saying that. But on the reverse, like you're training gun safety to gun owners. Will your business ever switch over to like training a teacher on what to do if there's a gun present, like more on the defense when you don't have a weapon present? Like, will that ever happen from a company like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the last thing that we teach is to draw the weapon. So we obviously have to teach safety. We have to teach how to use a weapon, how to be very, very proficient with a weapon. And frankly, most people are not. Even if they've been shooting their whole lives, they're really not that proficient.
Yeah.
You have to teach you how to deal with things under pressure. But our whole teaching program is to, first of all, try not to be in the situation in the first place, and teaching you skills to not be in that situation, to put yourself in a better position, where you park in a parking lot, where you sit in a restaurant, how you set up your home, security, et cetera. So trying to prevent the situation in the first place. But then, if it occurs, then, giving them the ability to, have in their toolbox, de-escalation skills, plans, having a plan, and having a plan with their family, because just because you have a plan doesn't mean that your family knows what that is, right?
Right.
So God forbid somebody breaks in your home, there better be a plan, and there better be a plan that you've run, with your family, so that everybody kind of knows what they're supposed to do, instead of trying to figure it out, in the midst of a life-threatening situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another potentially dumb question, but I'm curious. I love the topic. At some point, shouldn't gun training hit younger children? I mean, if I think about what my fear would be about having a
Sure.
weapon in the home is not my comfort level with it, but having children in the home, that's
Absolutely.
that's probably my biggest fear. Shouldn't at some point schools or someone say, let's start showing what a gun is and what it can do to 10-year-olds so that it prevents some of this crap from happening later on?
Yeah, and that's it's great that you said that, and you're 100% spot on. So education's the key. So gun safety really is about education, and that starts in the home. The gun placement, educating kids about guns. One of the main reasons that accidents happen, with guns in homes with children, are because the guns are not secured, and because the kids are curious, because they don't know anything about the guns.
Right.
They don't know if it's real. They don't know the ramifications. They don't know how to operate the gun. So we've partnered with a nonprofit group called Project Child Safe, and that's exactly what they do. Is they help parents educate the kids. They have kits that help do that that normally you can get it at local police stations, depending if they have those in stock at the time. And there's a whole program that they have. So it is critical. Everyone should be educated on gun safety. Everyone should be. It's a critical component. And then you have a choice. You can own a gun. You cannot own a gun. Either way is fine. But if you're going to own a gun, you need training. You need to really take the responsibility to get proper training, because in a real situation, you need to be able to think of things. One is not overreacting, making sure that you're doing something that is not going to cause legal issues for you. Making sure that everyone's safe, in the sense of that how to handle the gun, how to handle under pressure, and all the things that you can do besides, go to that weapon system.
Last philosophical question, then we'll get into the franchise side. If from your business standpoint, like if I think about a burger brand, I guess potentially PETA protesting outside your burger restaurant for hurting animals is a possibility, but it doesn't happen. In your field, like it is a political viewpoint, and people are it's like there are very few that can live in gray areas. Like it's super black and white. Have you had to run up against that? And in my opinion, it ends up being like, if humans are willing to have a conversation about a topic that is somewhat sensitive, then it's fine. But when you run into someone that's unwilling to have a viewpoint, even though what you're doing is trying to help, does politics ever hit and stress you out?
No, that's a lot of that's just politics. That's a lot of that's just politicians kind of polarizing, those topics, right? There's two extremes of this. Should everybody have a gun? No. Should you be able to get a gun and not train? I don't think so. I think there should be some training involved. Not saying you don't have a right to have it, but you really have a responsibility to to get that training. I mean, I might like 747 jets, but nobody's going to let me fly one. I might have a right to fly a jet someday if I get the proper licensing and go through all the steps and get certified in all the planes before that. But nobody's going to let me fly a 747, right? So those are things that are important. But we haven't running into any protests. It's surprising that if you really, outside of maybe some extremists on both sides, if you've talked to the normal person, they really are they're mostly for it. And if you look at the gun sales and all the people that have never owned guns before that have bought guns in the last few years, it's shocking. So people are really starting to realize they have to be able to protect themselves on some level, and everybody does have a right to protect themselves. And with crime really skyrocketing, and sometimes in some cases police resources being diminished, and training resources being diminished, it's more important than ever to be able to at least have that option to be able to defend yourself and your family properly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So on the franchise side, is there a consistency on the persona of your first six? Are they former law enforcement or former military? Like, are you finding a trend here, or is there something else? Is there something else in the persona of your buyer?
Yeah. So what we find is, I mean, those are potentially candidates. There's no question. But really, what we're looking for is, in what we've seen, is that it's people that really know, they understand what we do. Some of these people were in the first kind of early adopters, were members that just love it. They love being here. They love what we have. When they learned that we had a franchise opportunity, they just kind of went crazy. And we've had, a lot of members express interest in, in a franchise, in becoming part of this, because they see the impact that we have, to their confidence, to really empowering them, the impact that we have in the community and safety. And we have, dozens and dozens of amazing stories where lives were saved, or issues were avoided, or attacks were thwarted, because of the training from actual members, including civilians and law enforcement. But ultimately, here's the great news about this opportunity, is that it serves a real good in the community. The unit economics are very strong, and someone who has a business background, has run a business before, who has managed a group, has those kind of skill sets, is a perfect candidate for what we're doing. When it comes to the training, we do the training. So we can train somebody who has some type of firearms, instructor background. We could train a franchisee to be an instructor over a little bit of time. But we have a very comprehensive training and support program. And so even if it was a veteran or former law enforcement individual that wanted to be a franchisee, we still have to do some retraining, because we have a specific, curriculum and an advanced, curriculum and program. And like I said, this reality-based threat training is a very new concept that we've really helped spearhead. And it's not the same as just going to a range and putting holes in a piece of paper with a non-threatening target. It really is quite different. It really is the things that somebody needs to prepare mentally, physically, legally, for a real life encounter.
What's the investment right now?
It ranges between 250 and 500. That includes the franchise fee, the upfront franchise fee. Kind of depends on the build out. Obviously, there's it's not a super complicated build out, but there's multiple rooms that are needed,
Sure.
for these training labs, for the simulators, and some general purpose space, offices.
Are you
lobbies.
making earnings claim in item 19?
Not yet.
Okay.
We haven't yet. No.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Obviously, you're in the early stages of it, but look, I mean, in franchising, one, brands don't sell brands, people do. You're doing a good job of telling your story. You established groundwork on unit one. You showed what it looked like. Your customers bought into it. They want to go buy your franchise. That's great. You've engineered a lower side investment. It's cheaper than a restaurant. It's a little bit more than home service. When you can show what the numbers are, that's going to give you another tool. But frankly, your first six know a secret that others don't, so they can
Absolutely.
just lean on them. But it seems like you're doing the right thing. If to close out, there's a ghost candidate that's listened to our conversation so far. Anything else you want them to know about the business opportunity?
Yeah, just I think that when they learn more about it, they're going to see that it has very strong unit economics. In margins, I think it competes very well with some of the best franchises out there. It certainly could exceed others, and sometimes people are looking for something more than just a business opportunity as well. And this is something where it is very fulfilling. It's fulfilling on a daily basis, working with members, working with community, working with law enforcement. All the great stories and feedback that we get, and we do make an impact, and we are making an impact, and we just want to make a more substantial impact nationwide, and try to get this type of training that's desperately needed, across the country.
Last thing I'll say that I think is an important number is the reality is you're training humans on an element of safety, and frankly, it ends up being life protection. I would almost want to see a ticker or a milestone tracker of how many people you train, and use that as a PR opportunity every 100,000, whatever that number turns into, because that's a tangible impact that you're making to communities.
Mhm.
And it will show to other communities what the purpose of having you in there is,
Right.
where even local politicians can champion for you to be there, because the service that you're providing is educational and safety training. So if I bought your brand today, that's the first thing I would do. I'd highlight members who have gone through this, and even giving them the graduation certificate to give a yearbook of all these folks that have gone through it, because you're clearly on a mission to make people safer when it comes to firearms. And I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, and that's a great idea.
Well, for Wes, I'm Nick. Thank you for doing this, Wes. This is another episode of Meet the Zor.